The Memory of Love. Chapter 12. An evening, Friday. Adrian waits for Kyle. It is early still, and the bar is close to empty. His beer, a local brand, is gassy and pale. Adrian watches the other customers, a pair of African men, friends of the bartender, a small group of expatriate men at the bar. Two local girls keep company with the experts. A trail of sea air reaches him through the other darker odors. The beer is his second on an empty stomach. As Adrian looks around, his eyes come to rest on one of the women. She is wearing a purple top, leaning her body against the man in front of her, her head over his shoulder. Of her companions, Adrian can see little more than an expanse of back, a stripped shirt, a tanned forearm. The woman is pretty by any standards, resting against the man with feline languor. Adrian watches her, mentally positioning himself in place of the man against whose chest she leans, imagines the feel of her breasts, and wonders what it would be like to have sex with her. He takes a moment to speculate how such a thing might be managed. Would he come here alone? Wait for her to approach him? Sit at the bar, perhaps? Now he realizes that she has shifted her gaze and is looking directly at him. She holds his eyes unabashed, a long, dark, opaque stare. Embarrassed, Adrian turns away. Adrian has spent the better part of the morning at the mental hospital, talking to the attendants and staff, those who might have more information on the woman patient, accompanied at first by Salia. He had eventually managed to persuade the nurse to leave him to his own devices. From the staff and from the hospital records, Adrian learned there was a pattern to the woman's admissions. Loosely speaking, they occurred every 6 or 7 months. On each occasion, she'd been found wandering, hardly extraordinary in a country where so much of the population had been displaced. Still, the woman had been brought to the hospital by a stranger or strangers, whose names had sometimes, but not always, been recorded. Her psychiatric records were neatly kept, though scant. No more luck either. With the ward notes, the attendants had little in the way of formal training. Adrian had spoken to them all, careful to show due deference. A few more details had emerged. Once she had been found outside the gutted ruin of a department store. Twice she'd been examined by the visiting physicians, who found her to be in good physical health. No evidence of substance abuse or epilepsy. Her sojourns at the hospital lasted a few days, 2 weeks at most, and concluded. Adrian was surprised to read, with a self-discharge on each occasion. Her name was Agnes. When he was as satisfied as he could be, Adrian had gone along to the women's ward. It was lunchtime. An attendant stood in the middle of the ward, ladling rice out of steel vats onto plastic plates. The woman moved forward, forming a semicircle around the trolley. From the other side of the room, a woman crossed the floor with a stiff-legged gait. The Thorazine shuffle. A long time now since Adrian had seen it. In the trembling hands of others, he recognized, too, the side effects of Haldol. Agnes was sitting on the edge of her bed, holding the plate in her left hand, eating carefully with her right hand, wrist held high, delicately gathering the food with her fingers. He noticed she didn't lick her fingers clean like most of the others, but poured water over them into a basin from a plastic kettle by the side of her bed. Adrian approached her from where she could see him. She gave no indication of having heard him. He positioned himself so that he was standing in front of her, leaving her no choice but to look at him. I'm Dr. Lockhart. Not strictly true, but she'd learned how it worked here. She looked up and blinking. The light of her eyes unchanged, either by recognition or confusion. Come, he said, and indicated to her to stand up. He turned and walked away, slowly at first, until he felt her following. Do you know who I am? Adrian was sitting in Ileana's chair, the woman opposite him. Salia had come to act as interpreter. Now he put Adrian's words into Creole. They had discussed this already. If the woman was from the city, she would understand. If she was from elsewhere, Salia might or might not be able to help. Agnes sat hard upon herself. She offered no answer. Can you tell me your name, your own name? She was silent still, though she had moved her head slightly at the sound of his voice. Her fingers worried at a loose thread in her dress. He repeated the question. This time there came a sound, a murmuring, as though she was trying out sounds. In this way, she failed to answer any of the basic questions Adrian put to her. The date, day, or time, a knowledge of where she was. He watched her carefully. The sideways motion of the head, the pauses in the plucking of her thread. He gathered an impression that she was at some level computing the questions. She hadn't yet looked at him. Do you know how you came to be here? She looked up, rolling her head back on her shoulders, and gazed somewhere into the space between him and Salia, leaning against the window ledge. A dark line appeared between her eyebrows. Her breathing quickened momentarily. She rubbed her hand across her face. Did you come here on your own, or did somebody bring you? The plucking stopped and started again, furiously. Adrian paused, aware of Salia watching from the sidelines. All this would be reported straight back to Attila for sure. Agnes's fingernails were trimmed, he observed. Her hair was neatly braided. Either somebody did these things for her or she did them herself. He doubted anybody in this place was responsible for such a degree of care. He altered his tone to one of brisk impersonality. Can you count your fingers for me? She looked down at her hands and moved the fingers one by one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, she whispered. Good. And the other hand? This time she missed her thumb, finished up on 4, and started staring at her hand. Try again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So she was in there, somewhere, and she understood English. Later, in the same room, he drank tea with Ileana and described the woman and their session. He had concluded it after 15 minutes, long enough to gain an initial impression. To Ileana, he gave an account of what had occurred. My guess is that she's from a reasonable background. Her appearance, composure, the fact she understood English, I'd certainly like to know who brought her here. Maybe they could be of some use. Quite probably, or not. If her appearance is as you say, then that might encourage someone to bring her to a safe place like this, hoping for a reward or a tip, either from us or the family. Has anyone made inquiries with the police? I doubt it very much. Even if we thought they'd be cooperative, who here has the time? They'd left it there. Adrian would examine her again in 2 days' time. He is on his third beer when Kai arrives and drops into the chair next to him. Without apology, he lifts a hand at a passing waiter, indicates Adrian's beer, holds up 2 fingers. Adrian has grown used to the silences, their textures and shoulders. Around them, the bar is filling. A mass of insects thickens around the fluorescent lights, their humming resonating with the buzz of the lights. By the time Kai is on his third beer, Adrian is hungry. They order skewers of roast meat, smeared with crushed groundnuts and pepper. Elated and now somewhat drunk, Adrian orders another round. He is tired and he survives the feeling, the exhaustion that comes from a hard day's work. He hums along to the music, another beer, and another. A woman standing at the bar is watching Kai. Square shouldered, blonde hair, the skin on her back and shoulders faintly pink and filmed with moisture, exposed by a blue halter neck top. He can see the pale outline of her bikini straps, the red swelling of an insect bite. Her mouth is open, eyes narrowed, head angled. Her pose is one of concentrated desire, such that Adrian, shocked, looks to see whether Kai has noticed. Kai drains his bottle and gets to his feet, headed for the toilet. As he does so, he staggers slightly. Watch how you go. The woman pushes away from the bar, moving towards Kai, never once taking her eyes from him. When he straightens himself, she is there in front of him, her breast pointed at his chest, so close her body almost touches his. Hi, she says, and puts out her hand into the narrow space between them. I'm Candy, or was it Sherry? Some such. Later, Adrian cannot be sure. He is taken aback by her boldness. Can I buy you a drink? Kai looks down at the woman, who waits in the moment of silence that wells briefly up in the wake of her question. No thanks. He places his empty bottle carefully on the table. The woman wakes the best of the rebuff, pushes her lips into a moan of mock disappointment, lifts her shoulders, puts her head on one side, and looks up at him. But Kai is already off, headed for the toilet. She shrugs and saunters back to her friends, resumes her place by the bar. A moment later, two Middle Eastern-looking men, swarthy and tight, move from the other side of the bar to take up positions either side of the woman and lean across her, breathing into her neck, touching her hair, and she is laughing again. Adrian turns away, thinks again about his friend, about the wall inside him. Kai occupies only the present, reveals little of his past, of the manner of his existence when he is not at the hospital. Adrian has no real idea, imagines only a house with relatives, a shared room, clothes strung up against the light. He is adept at taking care of himself, though so perhaps a house full of bachelors. Where else does he spend his evenings? In places like this? No, this is for Adrian's benefit. At night, Adrian hears the sounds from Kai's dream, footsteps later into the night that begin and end in no place. Has lost count of the times he has come through to find Kai awake and dressed while the stars still glimmered in the sky outside. Kai returns. He has stopped at the bar on his way and purchased 2 more bottles of beer. Adrian, because he has been thinking about these things, asks, "Ever been married?" "Who, me?" Kai deflects the question. "Yes." "Ever been married?" "Nope." He appends his bottle of beer, tipping the liquid down his throat, his eyes on a point somewhere past Adrian's shoulder. Adrian takes a sip from his own bottle. The food has helped, and his head is, for a while at least, clear again. "Once, nearly, I thought about it," says Kai. "And?" Kai shakes his head. "We were too young, at least so I thought. I'd set myself a lot of things to do when I graduated. A few things got in the way of that," he belches. "Like what?" "A little thing like a war." "What did you want to do?" "Plans, man. I had big plans." "To do what?" "To be the best, I guess. Just that. Me and Tejani. He was my friend back then. We never imagined it any other way." "What happened to him?" "Gone." He waved vaguely as though he were swatting a mosquito. "And the girl?" he swallows from the bottle until he has to stop for air. The girl, she's still out there. It is midnight. The crowd has thickened into a mass. Inside, the fluorescent illuminates some faces like moons, while outside, other faces slip in and out of the darkness. On the dance floor, a colored ball transforms the sweat of the dancers into glistening trails of red. Adrian and Kai sit alone at their table, marooned in the middle of so much noise and heat, like shipwreck survivors, exhausted, pleased to be alive. A song begins with a South African rhythm. Congo Mawai, Congo, Congo Mama. Come on, Kai is up and swaying on his feet. He is on his way to the dance floor. Adrian is drunk, enough to follow. Together they dance. Nobody cares. The blood and alcohol in his body, the lights cause Adrian's head to begin to spin around. He feels certain if he let himself go limp, he will be buoyed along by the welter of bodies. After a while, the dizziness overwhelms him and he makes his way back to the table, where he sits and watches Kai, his head tilted back, eyes half closed, dancing on.